Everything looks good.
Cool. Well, I don't know if you had any particular topics in mind. For those just joining us, welcome to Alchemy with Andrea and Andrew. My name is Andrew, and with us, of course, we have Andrea. And we will be talking about all things metaphysical and also be taking your questions and give Andrea an opportunity to tune in and see what's coming up in terms of your spirit guides or any other information that she tunes into. Do you have any particular topics in mind for this week? I had a few things that we could chat about, but I didn't know if you had anything on your mind as we get kicked off here, Andrea.
No, but let's see what you have.
Well, I saw a recent interview with Lee Harris and the Z's, and they're getting more specific about the events unfolding in the years to come very soon. And I know that most channels and guides and intuitives tend to be relatively conservative or ambiguous, I suppose, because timelines are so difficult to nail down. But this one was pretty specific, and from Lee Harris, who I'm not sure if you're familiar with him or not, but he's also been on Interview with ED and a few other kind of shows like that. But they're getting pretty specific about 24 through 27 being pretty important years. 24 being sort of a peak challenge year, for example, or where we might see things in new ways happening in bigger ways, I suppose, and more comprehensively. And then the 3 years that follow seem to be almost a reemergence. The other book that you and I've talked about recently by Sarah Landon also puts a time horizon of 2035 and says that there's a real possibility that we've got a fully awakened planet by 2035. And I know that with possibility, probability, vortices, they're not saying that that means that it's a high probability or low or not. They're just saying that this is technically feasible. I don't know about you, but it certainly seems like people are waking up more quickly and in greater numbers. And some of my friends and I have been contemplating, is this a reflection in terms of correspondence, as within, so without? So the more that we're awakening, the more that we are seeing an awakened world, or is this happening simultaneously? It feels a little bit more like it's happening simultaneously, but I'm curious to see what your feeling is on events that are unfolding and sort of the pace of movement that we've been at over the last few years and that you think we might be at over the next few.
So I do, it feels to me that the next years coming, starting with 2023, 2024, are accelerating, and that yes, there is an extreme amount of energy shifting for people. And I don't want to say as a whole, because that will happen once we come into our knowing individually, right? Our own truth. And that's the focus, I think, of these next couple of years, is really to start. You can't just not be a parent when you're a parent. However, there has to be that balance of you still doing what you need to do for you as your human experience here on the planet. And so this is what's really happening. And then as that happens, then the whole becomes one, and we really start coming into, it doesn't matter, the information, because it all just starts becoming about the love, and what that all encompasses, and how that is, and what that looks like, and how that feels. And so that's how we start really pushing, and things start, tidal waving and tsunami, coming in, as far as it being such an amazing time to be present on this planet. I can't imagine, through all the history, this is like, woohoo, the big one of being here. And you know, when you start realizing I have a role to play, and, you know, I do always say that, you know, we're here to change the world, but it starts with one person. So we don't, it doesn't have to be audiences or, you know, all this big stuff. And you have all these letters and degrees behind your name. It's just, you know, who we are, our beingness, and then sharing that and being that with others. So I don't have an exact timeline. I have noticed in even in my sessions, and just when I see things that are happening, I feel like I've been years ahead. You know, I don't know why my number seems to be 4, but, you know, people are telling me that I told them something 4 years ago, and I'm going, okay, 4 years ago, that's a long time. Like, how did I see something 4 years? So I don't know if I timeline jump too much, and that, or that's just what they want to show me. But it does seem sometimes like I'm seeing things, and 4 years sounds so far away to us as humans, and yet it's just it's a blip, you know, it goes, there's no time up there. So once we're in that space, there really is no time anywhere.
Yeah, it's literally happening at the same time. Well, that's a great dovetail for a similar question when we're talking about timelines and correspondence as within, so without. A great reminder to start with ourselves and what's going on internally. And I've kind of broken this down almost into 3 different ways of understanding why changing within will allow you to see change without, allow you to see the world differently. And so one, I think in the classic sense, the way that I always interpreted the be the change you want to see in the world was in a very organic sense of like, well, if I want to see something different, I'm going to do it differently. And then I imagine somebody will see me doing it differently, and then they might do it differently, and, you know, so on and so forth. That's a very organic and kind of snail mail way of getting change out in the world. And then secondly, you have, when you change internally, your relationship to everything actually changes. And so your experience of the world changes. And it's very fascinating to, on the one hand, consider that there might be things in this world that you would change. You would definitely say, you know, I want this, and this other thing to be different, or you might characterize or judge them, for example, to be certainly not of the light and in shadow or evil or wrong and all these other things. And you may find yourself in a different phase of life, having perhaps taken a few more steps down the road in your path, and now looking at those very same things differently and just seeing them differently, seeing them play out differently, assigning different meaning to them. So rather than seeing evil or seeing darkness, you might see the unfolding of paths and journeys, and people here learning what they're here to learn. And so that's a second way where you can change the entire world literally by changing yourself within, because you've now changed your relationship to everything. And so you see everything differently. And then the third way, lastly, is more of, to your point about jumping timelines entirely. And that's occurred to me that, well, if I go in and do a whole bunch of really good work, and now I see this world very differently than I used to, and I'm claiming it in a new way, is it plausible that now I jump to a parallel timeline and that now becomes my reality, because all realities are happening simultaneously, and there's as many as we want, as many as we choose.
So I 100% agree with you on that, on all of that. And, you know, right, everything is perspective of what is the perception that we have of anything is self-taught, parent taught, society taught, however you're taught, nature taught. And so whatever our desires and whatever our wants are is always we're going to be on that path because that's what's drawing us. And, I just had a session recently that we were really getting into the conversation about, well, why can't I see, or why can't I experience? I want to talk to spirits. This is what I want. And, people, I can't say why it's not happening or why it should happen. And it is one of your wants. You can keep going down that path of wanting to learn what that is for you, what it looks like. However, the whole trajectory and perception is, I had a vision in a meditation. I think I shared this before. I can't remember if I did it even on our last one, but I was with my grandfather and I was not yet born. And he was showing me this basic memory, right? So I'm looking through the cloud and he's showing me the timeline, and then there's a bright light way down in my life. And he said, if you can make it to that light, he said, then you're going to be okay and you'll see. And I was like, what will I see? You'll see. And so was that predestined? Was that my contract? Was that, I had already chose, I'm going to go through all this trauma as a kid because all I got to do is keep going to get to that. Now, then you come and you're born and you have all the trauma. And then I look back and then I do remember certain times in my life thinking I did want to die, but then there was that side going, no, you just have to keep going. You're going to get through this. So there was that self-talk that got me through that, because I wasn't hearing it from anybody else. But if I hadn't been telling myself that, and of course there was spirits, but I wasn't, as a kid introducing and bringing them into my fold of really truly understanding what I was hearing. So that perception that you do have something planned, that's why people go, I know I'm supposed to be doing something else. And okay, you probably are, but it might not be here yet. We're waiting, or you're on that path. You're opening those doors. If you just keep saying yes to the universe and yes to all possibilities and yes to no matter what, I want to, blah. Now, the blah can be super generic or super open. So if you get too wide open and you're just like, I'm open to, anything and everything, and you're just not specific, or you say, I'm open to only getting a blue Cadillac, right? Then it's not that you're missing the intention. It's just all the other possibilities, all the other dominoes before you that you could hit to keep choosing a different path. But if it's not on there, and that's really not what you're supposed to be going down that path, then it gets really hard. Then you start feeling resistance, and then things aren't going your way. It's a true sign of what is going on. I don't know, just take a step back. You're always on the right path. However, when you have a knowing that there's more, it's you, and then you got to bring that out. You got to bring that into your path, and you have to say, look, no matter what, this is what I want to know. I want to know my truth, and I want to know how I can love myself more, which just means you're going to love everybody else more. And what does that look like? Start showing. And I'm going to be on this, running, jogging, fast-paced hurdle path. And I'm going to go because I want this. I want to know first, it's here. We're here first. So it's, the as above, so below. I love all these because it always puts into perception that we're always not without, and we're always not fully within. We're always in between. It's this passage. It's always this back and forth, ebb and flow. All those laws, they all coincide with one another. I mean, everything we read, it always comes back to certain things. It's just, how do we get there? We all need, these guides and teachers to bring us in to help us be taught, prophesied to learn, to share, to expand, to, I love Ephesians when, Paul's saying that some of these will have gifts. And when I was a Christian and I'm reading, I'm going, well, why? Why are you saying that they're going to have a gift of prophecy? There'll be you know, a gift of counseling, a gift of teaching, and yet, you know, now I see it, I get, you know, pastors or preachers, that's in my mind, you know, as a Christian, you're very narrow-minded, thinking, well, it's all got to be within the church because it can't be with, you know, outside of it. And yet nature, you know, is our counselor, nature is our teacher, nature, you know, you could put anything in there because it's all around us, because as above, so below, as within, as without.
Correspondence. So yeah, that dichotomy, that almost contradiction that you talk about gets me sometimes, but I really just laugh because it depends on which tradition you're learning or books you're reading or what have you, but there's always this sense of simultaneously, nothing can be manifested until it's first an idea. It's got to be known to be possible first. It has to be claimed as a possibility, and then permission granted to, you know, to achieve it or to have it or to, you know, to realize it. And so nothing is in form without first being a thought, which is great. That makes sense. That's sort of the mechanics of manifestation. But then at the same time, you also have this message that says, not to be attached to an outcome, not to decide what things should be, not to decide how they should look. And the answer, as I've found, really, as you feel caught between what am I manifesting, what am I choosing to manifest versus, you know, how open can I be to how, you know, to all the possibilities, is a state of allowance. And when you go back to what you were talking about with people saying, I feel like I should be doing something big or something more, well, I get reminded from time to time that a big part of what we are here to do is exactly what we're doing, the way that we're doing it, whether that's me and you having conversations like this with folks that jump in and also have questions to ask and things to add, or even if it's just how we are in our daily lives, the broadcast that we're in, the willingness to simply be in this present moment is a broadcast, and it's our service. It's what we're putting in the fields of everyone that we encounter as a possibility. So going back to that original thing, we can create a possibility in somebody else's field without even saying anything to them, without even talking to them, but we introduce this energetically, this sort of way of being, and then their higher self and their self will decide, obviously together, whether or not they're going to pursue something like that. But it all comes back to more a state of being and allowing and really surrendering into this moment and allowing whatever it is that's coming up, because things that come up obviously stoke reaction on our parts. And that's, you know, that's come up recently where I've been learning at work more, where in my role, people tend to bring things to me. And I'm now starting to establish a little bit of a triage approach to this, where I can at least start to ask, is this something that that you'd like me to help you with? Is this, you know, because I can think of a million different ways that I might solve it, but all too often somebody will bring something to me and energetically I get immediately absorbed into it. Suddenly I have the same sense of frustration and difficulty and everything that they have, and I'm like, how are we going to fix this? And instead now I'm just like, even though it's my company and arguably my problem, it's like, well, but no, this is not. We're nothing but people, and all of the challenges that come through are coming through for everyone here to deal with. So now I can ask a very simple question. Well, is this something that you'd like help with, or is this something that I can just listen and hear you out on so that you can kind of think out loud or be able to be heard? That in and of itself, that question, is this something that you'd like me to help you with? When I ask that question, I realize that that's not necessarily the question that somebody hears. Because if I say, can I help you with this? The real question that you're now asking yourself as you hear that is, do I need help with this?
Exactly.
Should I need help with this?
Right.
Can I solve this on my own? And that simple shift, when I, you know, just ask somebody, just, you know, very nicely and tactfully and waiting for the appropriate place, but okay, you know, how can I help you with this? Or is this something that you'd like me to help you with? That will start to pivot them away from what might be a victim mentality, or like, this, you know, all this stuff is just happening to me, to, okay, well, what is going to solve this? And is this something that I can solve on my own, or do I need, some assistance? And that's how I know when it's time to get involved. But even energetically, the experience for me is still quite a bit different, because in that first scenario where I just get sucked right into it, I'm immediately taking on the energetic experience of the person in front of me that is
Mhm.
having this frustration or dealing with whatever. Whereas if I say, do you want some help with this? And they say, yes, I could use some help with this. Well, now it's not me in their role dealing with that thing the way that they are. Now it's me helping somebody that works for me. And
Right.
just energetically, that changes the whole pattern. And so I can still see it from a little bit higher vantage point than I could have. So all that was to say is that just in our day-to-day interactions, there's huge things that we can do by lifting our own consciousness that will have a follow-on effect to the people in our lives.
Yes, I agree with that. Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit more, sticking with the theme of the future here. You've seen some things, and I'm not necessarily looking to get hyper specific on them, in so much as perhaps introduce the concept to people of non-linear timelines and simultaneity. So my understanding of this is that when you see something, it exists in a probability possibility combination. So it's like, of all possible outcomes, it could be almost anything. Here's some things that are sort of circling around in this center of gravity, this nexus that where we're sort of heading. But obviously, free will, choice, and everything can move beyond that. But is that how you would? Is that an accurate description of what this looks like when you see something that appears to be in the future, and why maybe attaching a firm date to it gets a little tricky sometimes?
It does. There's a couple of things. One is, I know that the galactics are going to be playing a bigger role in all of what's going to unfold. That is a hard concept for a lot of people to grasp, just because they haven't made themselves known to us in a physical form. We've only had movies, we've had historical elements, right? Pictographs, pictures, paintings, hieroglyphics, whatever, but it's all ancient to us, right? Ancient civilizations. And so we have a way to separate that. And yet there's a real strong people who are awakening, are experiencing things. And as we were talking earlier before we started, was, Bigfoot, the sightings of Bigfoot, or the dog man, or these lights that are in the forest that are showing up. And so the people had been afraid to talk about this because it just wasn't accepted. And now it's accepted. And when you have platforms, right, all the, whatever social media, YouTube, whether it's a video or just talking about it, it's a way to express ourselves. And I have known this, and just hear other people say, it just disappeared. It walked through a tree. It went somewhere. Where did it go? And in their own confusion, start looking up, and they know to call it a portal. And so if we know they exist here, I had an experience. I was actually, I don't remember. I was in a meditation or in a group meditation. I can't remember. And I saw this portal actually on the road on 50, going from Placerville to South Lake Tahoe. And now I wasn't driving, but there was this particular curve, and there was this massive portal there. And I could see through it, and I could see ships on the other side. They were all kind of, it was probably like 5 of them. Some were a little bit farther, some were closer, but they were all pointing, like waiting for this portal to get bigger. And all I remember, it was so clear. It's like, close it. And I'm going, I'm going to myself, me? You want me to close that? Like right now? Right here, right now, and they're going, close it. And I'm going, I don't know how to close. Okay, and I just went into it. I just pictured that it was closing. And then I pictured this big submarine hatch like door. And I just was like, well, I got to close that. And then that didn't feel like it was enough. So somehow there was belts that I was able to strap across this submarine door. And I'm going, is that good enough? No, get some help. And I did reach out to people and I said, I need you to help me close this portal. And so the other two did partake. They saw it. It didn't take, they knew exactly where I was talking about. They went in and they did whatever. And so I know that these portals, as we get closer to awakening, I feel there's going to be more portals. Now, what does that mean in line to your question is, are we going to be able to go through those portals? Is that part of our experience if we're open to it so I don't want to say timeline jumping because that's something different, but when you go through a portal, that is a whole different dimension. That is, you are able to, in a split second, the wormhole is go through and you're somewhere completely different. And so when that happens, do you know how to get back? So it's a slippery slope, like the wormhole, of choosing whether or not that we want to do that. If we're going to have these capabilities soon, then how are we going to allow ourselves to have these experiences, astral traveling, going to just even our planets in this galaxy and then beyond? So I think that as the timeline, it's like, I think you said it earlier, Andrew, that the veil is thinning. And in the January of 2020, my experience and what I had heard, and there was a lot of spirits that were needing assistance of going to the light, but it was kind of hard to explain. However, I kept hearing over and over, the veil is gone. And what I realized, it was for me, not for everybody else. So that kind of really started changing. And at every, time, it just feels like as it gets quote unquote thinner and thinner, or I get more awoke and awakened to the more of myself, then it absolutely is going to change. People are going to have quote unquote dreams and go, oh my gosh, I got to tell someone, you got to hear this one, right? They're not dreams. That is part of us waking up to the experiences that are beyond, that are the more of us. And so we get to start having them, which we already, a lot of people are now, or feeling this high anxiety. And sometimes the anxiety can be like really heavy, but then sometimes it's the anxiety of, you're super excited, but you don't even know what for, but you're like, but why am I? So we tend to like crush it, Then other times you're like, woo, it's gonna be a good day. Don't know why, don't care. It's just, I'm high vibing and it's awesome. So it's really, you're just picking up, it's the vibrations, they're getting stronger. It's like, I always say you drop a rock in the lake, and that ripple, that first one's really big, but as it goes out, it gets, smaller and smaller and smaller. So think about the rock just, being source, and we're trying to go over these hurdles. In the beginning, they're really easy, but then as we really start getting closer, it's like, oh, dang, that ripple, that's a big one, which could look like a tsunami to us as a human going, I don't know how I'm going to get over that. I mean, how do you get over a tsunami wave? It's so, but we somehow do, because we want that experience. We want to be closer to who God truly is and what that is, and bring it here, heaven's here on earth. So we make it what it is.
Indeed. It's certainly a subjective experience, the kingdom, heaven on earth. And I love that there's so much of that available now, that this is the thing. This is what we're all here for. This is what we're shooting for. This is what's available to us. And a few years ago, 5, 10, 20, 30 years ago, those just weren't, well, I say mainstream, they just weren't very common. They weren't very accessible lines of thinking. I'm not saying that there was no one out there saying it, but certainly in my experience, not that I ever got to experience until much more recently. I mean, this concept, this highly Christianized concept of heaven happening after death, is falling by the wayside, and people are waking up to their own eternal nature, and realizing that there's some context to be had around this life, and there is a level of comfort and this sublime experience to be had in this present moment awareness that has been beautiful, and it seems like it's becoming more and more available. We do have a question here. Here, Sasha, I'm just going to unmute you if that's all right, or I'm going to ask you to unmute. If you don't want to, that's okay. I'll read your question, but you have a good question here, so if you'd like to ask.
Thank you, and hello. Andrea, I have a quick question for you, because I know what's coming is going to be very difficult, and it's going to affect the people who are struggling financially a little bit more in terms of food shortages, in terms of the price of heating, all of these things. And so on the one hand, we want to prepare so that we're not eating bugs in the spring, but then on the other hand, we also have to prepare maybe energetically or spiritually, whatever your paradigm is. And so I'm wondering if you have advice for how people should prioritize their different projects, because I think that seems like it's going to be kind of crucial. And it seems to me that there's some urgency to this, because I think a lot of people are starting to feel like time is kind of running short. So that's my one question. And then I have a second one, but I'll start with that.
So I get the sense of urgency, but the sense of urgency is created because once you feel that you have to hurry up and do something, there's an element of fear. So you've already lowered your vibration. So anytime that we're feeling that we're in a rush, there's a sense of lack of. And the food shortages, I mean, these things are happening, and I know it's the same thing, and I'm, quoting the Bible, but when God said to the people, go to the hills, and they listened. So it's so simple, because those that are hearing these things are taken care of. When what is the purpose of telling the parables of having the fish and the bread, and thousands of people were fed? So in a sense, I understand the urgency that people feel. And at the same time, this is when the miracles and magic will blow people away. And if there is not enough food, then we're in lack. If we are saying, I'm going to have enough, and I'm going to have enough to share, because that is who we are as a human species. This is why we separated from the galactics way back when, is because we did not want to be slaves. We're about humanity and loving and helping. And that is the human element that we get to have and share with everyone, no matter who they are, no matter what. So that I've heard it, I felt it, and I just send it out, Sasha, and I just go, let's, put it, it's okay. Because as soon as you feel like you're not okay, you're not. And that's when panic and fear will set in. And that's where the chaos comes from. But if you're walking around going, there will be, I don't have all the answers. However, I just know it will be, because this is our time. This is our opportunity. So I hope that answers your question on that.
I would like to dovetail on that too. I think that was really well said. And one thing that I would add to it is say that there isn't a food shortage. I would say that if you subtracted all of the money from the planet, and I'm not saying that that's exactly what the solution is here. I'm just saying that if you subtracted the idea of currency and money, we would still have the exact same amount of food, and we'd still have the exact same amount of people who need it. The difference, to Andrew's point, is where we're manifesting from. Are we manifesting from a place of lack and fear, or are we manifesting from a place of abundance and love? And if everybody when everybody manifests from a place of abundance and love, there will be great abundance for everyone. Fortunately, this is a rising tide, and while there will be people who will resist this kind of change, it's a rising tide that isn't going to be stopped. And so consciousness itself is going to transcend the need to learn through fear, and it will move into the recognition that love is the default state and that abundance is available at all times to everyone. So it may not be entirely pretty, but it's going to be much more difficult for the people who decide that it needs to be, and who decide that without money, without wealth, without disparity of income, without me having much more than, somebody else, then I don't know who I am. That's an identity problem for people that are going to be going into this and more resistant to the eternal nature of their actual being, which is what seeks to really be present here throughout this transition.
I have one more thing that came to me was, so I've never planted any type of a garden, and I got some seeds and didn't know what I was doing and thought I had read the books. And so I put them in the ground. Kid you not, Sasha, I had stuff growing. I don't know how it grew. I didn't even know what some of it was, but I will tell you, there was so much. I couldn't even eat it all fast enough. And this is the most amazing thing, is I had this vine, and on one end of the little garden area that I had was a watermelon, but on the other end, it was cucumber. How is that possible that I had watermelon and cucumber coming from the same vine? And I know they're of the same family, but usually they're two different seeds and not one pink and one white. So, I was just going, this is God's garden, because I got no control what's being done. These stalks of sunflowers came out of nowhere. The most amazing sunflowers I have ever tasted in my life. I mean, they were so good. I waited too long to harvest them, but the ones that I was picking out and eating were really good. And here's the most amazing thing. I shared my garden with an abundance of a plague of grasshoppers. So I left them. I did not want to kill them. And I thought, you know what? They're here, and whatever they eat, I'm going to still have whatever it is that I need and to feed some others. And so, and it was more than enough. And it really was, it was magical watching this garden grow. So, and I literally only had probably maybe 6 by 6 feet, and it was packed so full. I don't know how anything grew. It was a very small garden, but it was really fun. So, even people like me that don't know what I'm doing, just having some seeds and throwing it in this ground was an amazing experience. So I kind of feel like I can do that too. How fun, I'm a farmer.
Right. We have a good friend of ours, Austin, who is also really big into sustainable farming and agriculture. I know that I would think, actually, to extend on your question, Sasha, and what I think is a completely logical one to ask. The water also seems to be coming up quite a bit as a concern for whether or not there's enough or will be. And again, there's lots of opportunities for fear, because there's lots of people who are so used to operating within a framework of fear that they're basically just looking for the next thing to be mongering about. If all of the golf courses, stop getting water, for example, and all the fountains and all the ways that we use water that have nothing to do with growing crops, I bet suddenly we would have more than enough water to feed everyone. So the broader question is not just how do we make it through a transition that's going to be a little bit difficult for those most resistant to it, but how open can we be to a new life, a new kind of world where people are operating differently and in much more of an open and heart-centered way. I'm going to unmute you now, though, so you can let us know your thoughts on that and ask the second part of your question.
Thank you. Okay, so yes, I do agree that if you just kind of have faith and if you have the intent and the belief that you can kind of make things happen in reality that otherwise might not. And so I think that that is important to keep in mind, to kind of keep any fear at bay. I still do wonder, though, about prioritization. One thing, Andrew, in response to what you're saying, I think, and I don't want to say that this is a male thing, because I don't really buy into that whole kind of anti-men woke kind of culture. But I do think that as a female, I think I value money in a way that I think a lot of men don't necessarily understand. I like that I don't have to play nice to people around me that maybe trespass on my boundaries, and I like that I can openly believe in psi, in remote viewing. And if my neighbors think I'm crazy for it, that's okay, because I'm still able to go and make money and then be independent of reliance on them. And so I choose to do my utmost to befriend them and to maintain positive relationships with them. But if it comes to curtailing my own, doing what I know is right, and speaking for the things that I know are right to speak about, then I won't let concerns about, well, will they still barter with me? Will they still trade food? And so I think, and also I think women can be more vulnerable if they get pregnant or if we get sick. And so men kind of have this idea that they can always just go and cut down a tree and make a fire and, catch a rabbit and then there's food. But I think for me, I have fibromyalgia. I'm very aware of my vulnerability. So I like that I can work when I'm well and make money that I put in a savings account that doesn't rust, that doesn't spoil, that is just still safe there. And then when I'm sick, when I'm ill, when I'm vulnerable, then I can use that to buy food, to get shelter without having to trade. When we look at cultures that rely on bartering, a lot of the women and girls engage in prostitution in those societies, right? They trade sexual favors when they have nothing else to offer. And so I'm just saying that I think there is this tendency in our communities that talk about psi, that talk about energetic spirituality, to, I think, sometimes forget some of the realities that we have to negotiate in the world. And so that's why I'm asking about prioritization, because I think that we are going through a shift. And I think that you're right, Andrea, it's not a good idea to come from it with fear and concerns of scarcity. But I do want to be prepared. I would rather be in a position where I've engaged in the right project building so that I'm in a position to help people around me, rather than be someone who needs help from those around me, who maybe is more easily exploited because of it, or vulnerable, or maybe I see other people in my community being exploited and I can't help them because I'm not in a position to. So I think that's something that our community maybe doesn't address very often. And so I just wondered what your thoughts are on that, I guess.
Sure. I would, just to comment on the first part, I could probably chop down a tree. I've never grown a garden though, and I can fish, though I couldn't make it to the closest lake without falling over dead, because it's probably an 11-hour hike from where I live. So I would not consider myself to be somebody that feels that I am naturally suited for survival. And nor do I think that is the way that this transition looks. Now, here's what I will say, you wanting to be prepared is based in your entire lifetime. The same, almost all of us have been indoctrinated in bad things will come. You should be prepared in order to mitigate them or to see your way through them. And whether you like it or not, whether it is convenient with the reality that you are facing today or not, that is where you're manifesting from. You either accept the way that manifestation happens, or you don't. And you can't necessarily have it both ways, and to say that, well, it's really great to manifest from abundance and love until shit hits the fan, or I think it might hit the fan, and then really it's time to hunker down and prepare for the worst. What I would say is that fear is always something that will take you out of this present moment. And so in any moment, your higher self will know what needs to be done. The action that's called for will be obvious, and you'll do it in that moment when it needs to be done. And anything before then that keeps you either in anxiety or concern about the future, or regret about the past, for example, is an egoic exercise that's taking you out of this present moment where you want to be manifesting from. Now, what that preparation should look like, I don't know. There's a really great question. If somebody is fairly well ascended and really in tune and in touch and manifesting from abundance, and then suddenly in 2 years finds themselves starving to death, I don't know. Is that possible? I don't know. But I will say that claiming what's going to go wrong and deciding what's going to go wrong ahead of time, because we've got so much history to base it on, like, well, look around you, you can see exactly how it's going to go. Well, that's why we're repeating history, because we're repeating history and we're just doing the same thing over and over again. To your point about your neighbors and all of that, I don't think money has anything to do with that. Now, community having to do with survival, well, sure, but it doesn't mean that you have to live in a neighborhood around people that you don't like. And again, we're talking about after paradigms have shifted, where consciousness has now come up to a much greater degree. So things like prostitution and so forth are in such low vibration that those, after this transition, which we don't know exactly how long it's going to take, but as we've mentioned, there's some people that are seeing sometime in the next 3 to 5 to even 10 or 12 years, I mean, which is a blink of an eye if we're talking about it, to get from here to there. And if a big chunk of that time is spent reorganizing resources and getting people back into agriculture and getting community farming and things like that going, I think the idea is that the shift is what's going to carry the momentum, and the rising tide is going to come up. And then again, as far as who you spend your time with, obviously, I don't think that anyone's foreseeing another side or the other side of this transition, meaning that you're not going to have control over that and still be an individuated consciousness that gets to experience and have fun and do the things that you want to do. But it may look a little different than it has historically. I don't know if that helps at all, but Andrea, can you dovetail on that?
Yes. So no matter what, Sasha, to me, whatever you do, do it in love. If you want to save your money right now and you feel really good about that, do that for yourself, because that's where you're at right now, and stand in that truth of that knowing for you. If you want to prepare, and no matter who your neighbors are, do it, because if it were to happen in your lifetime, if it is created, if there is a shortage, that you want to share and give back out of love. And to Andrew's point is, I do feel that we are repeating history, because it's all that we are stuck in, this cycle, and we're changing that. So even if you're still going to do it knowing that, and we're shifting out, you're still going to be able to give back. You're preparing, you're going to share, whether you're helping families that don't have as much right now and they're stuck in a lower vibration, you get to help them rise up because you're giving them something. So if you're going to continue in your ascension process and learning the truth of who you are, then no matter what you do, you're going to be wanting to share and give and help and give back to those that are not in that space. And so, because there always is that negative positive, right? We're always going to have the negative people, but doesn't mean that we can't still help them, because they're there on their journey and they're having their experience. But when they experience pure love and kindness, even if they don't, they might even get more upset, because it's like, oh, she's so happy all the time. She's just so darn happy. It's frustrating because they're not. And so they look at you in a way that is like, why does she just always smile and she's so bubbly? I don't get it. So it's this, you're changing their perception of even themselves by you just being you. And so stand in that truth, though, of that divine feminine energy, because it is needed. And we are the compassionate, and men need the feminine energy to have the compassion. So it's not that we're taking away from them. It's just, I feel the calling of the divine feminine energy to rise up, because that is the natural state of that energy. And we are known as the caretakers, the mothers, and that is not repeating history. It just is. So this divine feminine with the masculine to move you, that, you know, they're about the action. So if we don't have both, right, you know this, it's just, it's stagnant. So keep doing what you're doing. And if you want to build, you know, a 6x6, you know, garden bed, and you throw some seeds in there, let God show you what can be done. I mean, and share, because once you start doing that, kill them with kindness. I mean, it does work, because if it is truly who you are, it just happens. You don't have to do anything. And then here's the beautiful thing that I think is going to also start showing itself is when I had said earlier that people are saying, I just know I'm supposed to be doing something else. When we get into these situations where we have done a repeatable historical event, whether it's personal or a little bit bigger, it challenges people to all of a sudden having to start thinking outside the box. If I'm going to, you know, survive this, or if I'm going to make it through this, I got to do something else. Like maybe even I got to go and build, you know, some tiny homes, because people are going to need something. And all of a sudden they know how to do it, because it's coming from this place of love. And we don't need to be watching YouTube channels, and we're not relying on people to tell us. It will come to us, because that's where you're supposed to be. And it's the most amazing feeling. So we're not suppressing people by saying, I've only got enough to survive for me for a year, and here's a little bit for you. Nope. You give, because it will change, and then though it will help humanity to want to do more and give back. Yeah, there might be those stragglers, but that's okay. We don't even need to give them energy. They're going to go do what they're going to do, and not putting ourselves in there. I mean, 100%. If you're in any kind of fear, just start using the word love and telling yourself, I love myself. I love the situation. I love what's going to happen. And it already did. I say the good thing that COVID did was it actually helped wake up a lot of people, because they had more time on the computer and they started asking questions, right? And so there's some positive to the negative. These situations get us to step out of our comfort zone. And so if you love your comfort zone, then love it right now, man. Love it.
That's funny. You know, I would say when COVID hit, that's a good reminder. I think that I was among the first to go hit Costco, and my wife and I at the time got 2 large of the big flatbeds full, like $1,500 worth of stuff. And this was before there were any lockdowns. I mean, people were literally looking at us like, you know, and they asked me at the checkout stand, and I told them that it was a family reunion. Because I was like, I didn't know what else to say, because I'm like $1,500 worth of everything you could imagine that we bought. So, I mean, I've certainly been there. What I would say is that, you know, if I had one of those buckets of the, you know, the prepper, the probably super gross, just add water, food packets, things or whatever, you know, something to get through. At some point, there may be a collective realization about what needs to happen, which is that people still need to be people. We still need to do the important work of carrying on a society. And that's going to be tricky while we, you know, figure that part out, but it's going to happen for our survival in relatively short order, which is why I would say that with a nice garden, with a lot of freeze-dried goods, or with those things that don't even require, you know, a freezer or electricity or whatever, to make sure that you have something to nourish yourself in, you know, a period of time to get you through until everyone wakes up and says, guess what? We can't go back to the way that we used to do things. Now we have to do them in a new way. And we're all going to have a lot closer relationship with our local farming community and agricultural suppliers and things like that. As for the divine feminine, totally agree. That needs to come on and re-envelop this current paradigm with a new outlook of possibility and what's possible. And that's not where we've been, obviously, for a very long time. And I came to hear recently that a lot of this was spinning out of the Atlantis collapse, and that there was a very sharp divide of yin and yang at that point. And obviously we went very much down the yang, and we see, largely where that imbalance has gotten us. And we very much need to rebalance that with an overcompensation of the feminine to come in and bring far more possibility than what we're currently open to right now. And that's what's about to happen. That's where we're at. Oh, Sasha, I'm going to ask you to unmute one more time in case you wanted to add to any of that.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you for your responses. They're well considered, and yeah, and it's given me things to think about. And Andrea, I think especially your perspective of saying, you can't necessarily change everyone, and human nature is varied. So you're always going to be dealing with people who are at different places in their own development. And I think rather than trying to tell people how they should be, or hope that you can push them into be, or kind of trying to develop structures to manipulate them into being the way you think they should be, that I think that you're right, that oftentimes it's better to just be who you think, okay, this is the best version of me that I can be, and hope that that models, right? So by you sharing, maybe someone sees you sharing and then they think, oh, maybe I could share as well. Maybe there is room for that even in a time of uncertainty.
Yes.
So I think that, yeah, to me, that's what I'm taking away is most powerfully from this, right? Is that modeling the behavior instead of always trying to manipulate, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah.
Likewise.
Yes. Thank you for joining and having those questions.
Yeah, those are awesome. And that brings us to the end of the hour. That was perfect timing.
Yeah.
I love the future forward theme that we had on this go round. And that was great questions coming from Sasha, and great dialogue and discourse. So I look forward to the next one. And do you have any closing thoughts for us or our viewers?
I'm going to say this probably every single time, is just keep going within, keep really focusing on yourself and your truth and bringing that out and loving however it comes out, because all of it is to help you to get to this absolute standing. I've said this for many, many years, you cannot unknow what you know. And when you know more about yourself, you can unknow it. And then you got to go, this is who I am. I'm crazy, weird, odd, bizarre. Yep. All right. I own it. And that's, I got other attributes, but that's just parts of the whole of me. So it's, to others, they might feel embarrassed or not want to stand out. But, once we allow ourselves to be who we truly are, it gives others courage to step out and to be who they are. So not to hide, in the fake society that we truly live in. So and more people are doing this. We're seeing it just exponentially unfold before us. So yeah.
Couldn't agree more. That's vulnerability as our superpower. Well, thank you again, and we'll sign off and look forward to seeing everyone again next time.
All right. Thanks. Bye.